What's happening, fam? L.A.R movement still moving. Book entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father. Amazon Kindle Create Space. Link will be in the description box below. In the description box below, just like in most of the videos. Um, the white one drop rule. See, sometimes we talk about race and color and colorism and the caste system. We, the one drop rule of black people come into play, but we don't never we rarely, if ever, talk about the white one drop rule. And people going, there's no such thing. Yeah, there actually is. See, white people were considered Anglo-Saxon, right? And people forget that um, past slavery in America being an annexed land, people forget that France and Spain were part of, and Portugal were part of this hemisphere, North and South America. It was, Britain. That's why we speak English. France. That's why Canada speaks French to a degree, certain provinces or whatever. Uh, Spain, Central America. That's why they speak Spanish. And Portugal, Portuguese, is why like Brazil speaks Portuguese. So people seem to forget that Anglo-Saxon was a particular group of white people. That's why when in America they don't say Anglo-Saxon per se. It breaks down to Anglo-Saxon when it's important to separate themselves from other quote unquote white people. So how is there a one drop white rule? Well, Italians weren't considered white because of their mixture with black DNA. Spaniards because of um, how can I say this? The time when Moors ran Spain, they weren't considered necessarily depend. This is why they have the skin tone thing. Olive colored. You realize olives are like light brown, and green. Sometimes dark brown. So when somebody says they got a nice olive skin, they get their tone from um, having some kind of black DNA. Just like when you look at the world itself, it's when you look at Africa, everything's black, and everything's black in Africa. The farther north you go, the whiter it gets. The farther we say east you go, it gets from black to yellow. West to America, it was from black to red. So this is why you have these colorism and caste systems everywhere, because people seem to forget. Like I said, Italians weren't considered white, Irish weren't considered white, um, Native Americans who were quote unquote red people, white people integrated to be the $5 Indians. So those people were considered Indian and white. So at some point you're gonna have Indians that are considered white. Quote unquote Jews, which is Jewish people, which is actually a religion. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're not. And you could look in history and realize, even with the immigration part of America, bring us your sick, bring us your, that blah 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 blah. Immigrants came here. All of them weren't considered white. You know, when the Kardashians are considered white when it's convenient, but when it's not convenient, they're Arabs. But people don't seem to get that, because you have a population of quote unquote white people who are Anglo-Saxon, and you got people who are not Anglo-Saxon, like Jewish people that I was bringing up. Then you got people who have some type of African mixture in them, as in Italians and Spaniards. Then, and then you have some Arabs that can pass. So, and when I say Jewish, that goes for Russians, Germans, Austrians, Polish people, because people forget. Um, a lot of over the years, a lot of white people had changed their last name. There are a lot of people who are famous and non-famous who have these quote unquote American last names, British or English type last names, when that's not their original last name. That was their way of fitting in, because there was a time where America didn't like um, Irish people and Italians and Russians and Jews and even Germans, like after World War II. But if you just change your name and change your accent, nobody fucking knows. And then you're blended into the white family. Like, you know, people would call because of what's the other name? Kris Jenner. People would call her white. So that's why her kids are quote unquote white. That's why the Kardashians, in some ways, are looked at as white, but some ways are not. And then that's why the Kylie and them that she had with Bruce Jenner, they're considered as just white. You know what I mean? It's a convenient thing. Now, the reason a lot of people don't look at their one drop rule is because, for one, it's for their numbers. It beefs up the population, because you have um, the four groups I talked about. But I didn't. But you also have the Hispanics. See, there's a difference between the Spaniards and the Hispanics, because there are people from the Caribbean and Central and South America that consider themselves white, whether they're um, whether they have white family members or they have mixed blood. you know, they will consider themselves, oh, well, we white. You can clearly see some of these people are not white, but they will consider themselves white. They will have immigrants coming from other countries, who they will be labeled as white for political reasons. You know, but even with the Hispanics, that's why some people don't pay attention that they're black Cubans, they're quote unquote white Cubans, and they're Cubans who are passing for white. In New Orleans, we used to call it was the term passe blanc. That's why there's a lot of black people who pass for white, and were able to get degrees in Louisiana, but they would get away from their black family. Nobody would know. That imitation of life type thing. So their population numbers look so big in America because, except for the black race, for the most part, everybody else is mixed into the white populace. That's what the white people who are Anglo-Saxon, the ones who weren't considered Anglo-Saxon, the Hispanics who are not white, the Arabs who are not white that are considered white. Sometimes you can take that to the Asians too. That's why the colorism propaganda is worldwide, because in Asia, in Africa, and in um, come on, Middle East, not so much the Middle East though, but South America, Central America, they have a colorist caste system where they promote everybody white and light and demonize everybody dark. So that wanting to be closer to white is a worldwide problem for people who are not accepting of themselves, because to be accepted as white means you can get the privileges of quote unquote being white. And that's why there's like a duality with people, because people buy into the one drop rule and then they lose themselves, and then they get mad because they really can't be who they truly are. You know, you can't. Everybody's looked at as an inclusive trader. So when quote unquote white people have infighting, we don't know it because we're not we include everybody as white. You don't realize that everybody doesn't get along just because of their cultural differences. What I mean by that is, you know, not I shouldn't say Arabs, Anglo-Saxons, Russians, Germans, Polish people, Irish people, I guess Celtic, um, Spaniards and if you want to say Jewish, Austria people, they don't necessarily get along. They just form like Voltron to be against you or us, you know. That, but they're all considered as white because it's just a tribal thing. Like Africans are considered Africans. It doesn't matter what country in Africa you're from or what tribe you're from. Same thing in America. It doesn't matter where you were born. You're still going to be considered, black regardless. But the difference is we don't we include everybody in our one drop rule by actual race, and we forget that people pick off numbers by the diluting of a race, you know, and that's the thing. Like some people couldn't figure out, that Nicole Richie wasn't white. And then people said, well, she's not black, but she was raised because her parents are like Puerto Rican. And then people are like, well, that's why we look at Puerto Ricans in some ways as black, because if you put a Puerto Rican child with a black family, they're just gonna think it's a light skinned kid. Just saying. That's why she could be in that family with no issue. Um, that's the other thing about it. So when you have multiple groups of people, whether they be Caucasian, Arab, Hispanic, even Asian, or even blacks passing, or Native American, then obviously they have a one drop rule that they've been implemented for the longest. And this is how people are so hypocritical when it comes to racism, because on one end they want all the privileges of being white, and on another end they want their individuality or their culture to be represented, but they can't do it under the umbrella of being white because you know the Anglo-Saxon population ain't really having that shit. So they become opportunists, and is infighting and traders in within. So I just wanted to explain some of that. I mean, some people will get it, some people won't. I'm gonna leave it at that for now. Peace.